I never imagined a church pew could feel like home, but after my breakup with Daniel, that's exactly what it became. Sundays used to be routine, but heartbreak turned them into something sacred. I was lost, not just emotionally, but spiritually, and I needed somewhere quiet to fall apart. That's when Pastor Elijah entered my life in a way I never expected. He wasn't like the other pastors I'd seen before. He didn't speak in riddles or sermons that felt far away. He spoke to the soul. During one service, I caught his eye while wiping a tear. Afterward, he approached me with the kindest voice, asking if I'd like to talk sometime. I nodded, desperate for someone to just listen. What began as short conversations in his office turned into deep emotional counseling. He asked questions no one ever cared to ask. What do you need right now? What makes you feel safe? And the way he looked at me, not like a broken girl, but a human being worthy of attention, made something shift inside me. There was a calm strength in him I admired deeply. Week after week, I returned. The church's quiet corners became places where I could breathe again. I started feeling hope creeping back in, like sunlight through stained glass. But somewhere between vulnerability and healing, I began to notice how much I looked forward to seeing him. I'd find myself dressing just a bit nicer, smiling a little more, watching his hands as he spoke. One evening, while I waited for our session, I overheard him comforting a child who had just lost his grandmother. He spoke with such patience and tenderness. It stirred something in me I didn't want to name. It was then I realized I wasn't just admiring his character. I was developing feelings. Real ones. It terrified me. I tried to dismiss it as gratitude. Told myself I was confusing kindness for something deeper. But then he began remembering small things about me. How I liked my tea. The name of my dog. That I couldn't sleep without white noise. He wasn't just offering spiritual advice. He was paying attention in a way Daniel never had. One night, my best friend noticed something in my tone when I mentioned Pastor Elijah. She raised an eyebrow and said, "You do know he's married to the church, right?" I laughed it off, but her words stayed with me. Still, the pull didn't stop. Our talks became more layered. We spoke about purpose, dreams, loneliness, even love. He never crossed a line, never said anything wrong, but the energy between us shifted. There was an unspoken thread tying our moments together. Each time we parted ways, I wished he'd say something, anything, that meant I wasn't imagining this connection. And yet, even as I questioned everything, I kept going back. Something inside me craved those moments more than I wanted to admit. Something told me this wasn't just about healing anymore. It was becoming something much harder to explain or justify. It was late, the church was quiet, and for the first time, I found myself completely alone with Pastor Elijah. Everyone else had gone home after the service, and a heavy rain outside kept us inside longer than usual. We sat across from each other, the soft hum of silence filling the space between us. It should have felt peaceful, but my heart was pounding. There was no plan, no intention, just a moment that had been building for weeks. He asked if I was okay, and I nodded, but he didn't believe me. He never did. That was one of the things I admired. He saw through the masks. I told him I'd been feeling off lately. He leaned forward, his expression soft, asking what had changed. I hesitated, knowing exactly what had, but unsure if I could say it out loud. I told him I'd started to confuse things, that I didn't know if I was looking for faith or comfort. He smiled, trying to reassure me, but he didn't know what was coming. I took a breath, then admitted it. I had feelings for him. Not admiration, not gratitude. Real feelings. And I didn't know what to do with them. He went silent. His face didn't change much, but his eyes did. He looked away for a second, then back at me. I braced for rejection, for a sermon about boundaries. But he didn't scold me. He didn't quote scripture or remind me of his title. Instead, he asked, "What are you asking me for right now?" I didn't answer directly. I just said, "I want to know if you've ever felt something, too." He leaned back, folded his hands, and after a long pause, said that he wasn't immune to emotions. That sometimes, even men of faith wrestle with thoughts they're not proud of. That we're all human. My heart sank and soared at the same time. He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no either. In that moment, I did something bold, something reckless. I told him we didn't have to label anything. That if he felt even a fraction of what I did, we could find a way to be discreet. No one had to know. It would be ours. Just for us. A private truth. A secret comfort. He stood up and walked to the window, watching the rain. Minutes passed. I thought I'd ruined everything. Then he said, "You don't realize what you're offering." I told him I did. I told him I wanted to feel alive again, to feel something real, without judgment, without rules. The silence that followed was louder than any answer. He never said yes, but he didn't ask me to leave. He didn't end our meetings. He didn't report it. And that silence, that decision not to walk away, said more than any confession could. Something had shifted between us, and there was no turning back. After that night, everything changed, even though we never said it out loud. We kept meeting, kept talking, but the air between us was heavier. There were glances that lingered too long, moments of silence that said more than words. He still offered counsel, but it wasn't the same. His words were more careful now, and mine were loaded with quiet hope. We were crossing a line without touching it. Eventually, it became emotional territory that neither of us could deny. We started meeting outside regular hours. He'd ask about my day, but not as a pastor, more like someone who cared beyond duty. I'd text him late at night, and he'd reply. Long conversations turned into something else entirely. We'd talk about music, books, childhood memories, and eventually dreams, his, mine, and sometimes ones that strangely aligned. We weren't physical, but we weren't innocent either. I convinced myself that it wasn't wrong because we hadn't done anything. But inside, I knew better. I was keeping a secret. He was too. The worst part? It felt good. Safe. I'd never been seen like that. Daniel never looked at me the way Elijah did when I laughed or shared something vulnerable. That look stayed in my mind long after I left his office. But the deeper we got, the more I began to feel unsettled. He started withdrawing. Some days he was warm, engaging, other days distant, almost cold. When I asked if something was wrong, he'd say he was just tired or preoccupied with church matters. But I knew better. Something was shifting. I wasn't enough to keep his attention consistent. Then one evening, I walked past his office while waiting for our session and saw him laughing with another woman, another member he was counseling. It was the same laugh, the same comforting tone. I froze. It felt like a punch to the stomach. I'd believed we had something unique, something sacred in its own way. But seeing him like that with someone else shattered the illusion. I started connecting the dots. I wasn't the first person he'd emotionally supported this way. Maybe I was just one of many. That look in his eyes, the softness in his voice, it wasn't special. It was practiced. Maybe not intentional, but habitual. And I had walked straight into it. The realization gutted me. What I thought was mutual, raw, and rare was something he'd done before. I had built my feelings on borrowed behavior. Suddenly, every text, every late-night talk, every shared silence felt false. I wasn't betrayed by lies. I was betrayed by what I wanted to believe was true. And the worst part? I had offered him something real, only to discover he'd never truly accepted it. I stopped going to the church. Not abruptly, but slowly. Missed a few Sundays, then stopped replying to his check-ins. He noticed, of course, but didn't push. That told me everything. If it had mattered to him the way it mattered to me, he would have fought harder to keep the connection alive. But he didn't. Maybe he couldn't. Maybe he never intended to. The silence between us became louder than any conversation we ever had. I replayed everything in my mind, trying to figure out where I'd misunderstood, where I'd let my feelings run ahead of reality. But deep down, I wasn't confused. I knew exactly what happened. I wasn't the first, and I wouldn't be the last. That stung the most. One day, he finally texted, asking if we could talk. I agreed, not because I wanted closure, I already had that, but because I wanted to hear him say it. To admit that what we had wasn't real, not to him. But when we met, he didn't deny it. He didn't apologize either. He said he cared about me, that our connection was meaningful, but complicated. That word, complicated, felt like a slap. It was his way of not taking responsibility while still trying to hold onto the emotional high we shared. I asked him if he'd ever meant it. He didn't answer. Instead, he said, "You helped me, too." That was the final crack. I wasn't looking to be someone's emotional crutch. I had opened up because I believed in something honest between us. I didn't need to be thanked for that. I needed truth. So I ended it right there. No more talks, no more what-ifs. I told him I deserved more than borrowed affection wrapped in silence. And I walked away, not just from him, but from the version of me that needed his attention to feel whole. In the weeks that followed, the pain was sharp but clarifying. I started journaling again, reconnected with friends I had neglected, found new spaces to feel seen, real ones. I realized I hadn't just been heartbroken by a man, but by my own willingness to ignore the signs. It wasn't love. It was longing dressed as connection. He still preaches on Sundays. I saw a clip online once, his voice calm, eyes kind, saying things that sounded beautiful, even true. But I don't hear them the same way anymore. I know the man behind the voice now. Not evil, not malicious, just flawed in a way I can't afford to be drawn to again. I carry no hate, no anger. Just wisdom I didn't have before. What happened between us didn't ruin me. It revealed me. It showed me the cost of mistaking attention for love and secrecy for something sacred. And now I walk forward knowing better, stronger, wiser, clearer. I was alone with my pastor once, but I'm not lost anymore.